Hi everybody, I am back today with part 2 of my Essential Workers of Your Kitchen series. Last time we talked all about pots and pans, and today we're going to be talking about knives. Knives is one of my favorite kitchen tools to talk about because I have a very strong opinion here, and that is never buy a knife set. I really feel like a lot of people have this block of knives in their kitchen that they got as a set. They maybe use one or two of them. They have no idea what 3 or 4 of them are even for. It's just not a good way to spend your knife money. A much better approach would be to buy individual knives that suit your needs. And I would argue that you really don't need a ton of individual knives. So let's go through the ones that I think every kitchen absolutely needs to have. We'll start small. So this guy is called a paring knife. This is going to be the smallest knife in your kitchen. It's good for just quick tasks. It's good for things like cutting up a piece of fruit or anything where you just need a really small, easy to clean, quick job. It's not meant to be your main knife. Every once in a while I'll see somebody trying to do major cutting with this. This is not a chopping knife. You're not going to cut an onion with this knife. But if you're just going to slice up an apple or take the pits out of cherries or things like that, this can be a good knife. And I do think a paring knife is something that everybody should have. Another one that I think is underappreciated is the bread knife. So you'll notice that a bread knife has ridges. Sometimes it's called a serrated knife. By the name bread knife, you could probably figure out it's good for slicing bread. The reason is that these little teeth are going to allow you to saw through the bread rather than squishing the bread. So we don't want to put a lot of pressure on bread when we're cutting it. It's also good for things like tomatoes, where if you put a lot of pressure on them, they're just going to squirt all their juices everywhere. Instead, you can gently saw through them without squishing them down. No other knife can do that. You have to have a serrated or a bread knife in your kitchen. A nice long one like this is the way to go. So that's a must-have. Next up is slightly less necessary, but if you're going to, have an extra knife around, I would say it's this. It's sometimes referred to as a boning knife or a fish knife. It's very thin. It's actually quite flexible. You can kind of bend the blade. It's great for getting the skin off of meat, raw meat, getting bones out of meat, a lot of more delicate tasks, usually always involving meat or fish. So I wouldn't say this is the knife you need to start with by any means, but if you are going to be cooking a lot of meat or fish, it is a good knife to have. Super sharp, just works better than your average knife. Now, a chef's knife, that is really the knife you must have. If I could have one knife, it would be a chef's knife. I often joke that I should start traveling with my chef's knife because we go to a lot of Airbnbs and the knives at Airbnbs, and I'm always the one who has to cook for the group, and I'm like, I can't. They'll be like this, and I'm like, oh, I can cook for 12 with this? No, you need a chef's knife. So this is my chef's knife. You'll notice it's a big knife, okay? It kind of looks like a paring knife, but much, much, much bigger. The way that you hold a chef's knife is actually to pinch above the handle here and then wrap your fingers around. This is a knife you can really control. You can chop like this with it. You can just chop like this. It's an all-purpose knife. There's nothing I really couldn't do with a chef's knife if push comes to shove. I think the important thing with a chef's knife is to pick the brand and the size that fits you. So I like to go to stores that will let me try them out. When my husband and I were first registering for wedding gifts, we went to Sur La Table, and they had potatoes and onions in the store, and we were allowed to pull out all their chef's knives and practice cutting with the different knives. And it was great because we actually ended up deciding we wanted different knives. So the one on the bottom here, this is mine. It's a Wusthof. This one on the top is a Shun. This is a German knife, very, very heavy duty workhorse knife. It'll last me my whole life. It's a great knife. Shuns are amazing. They're Japanese. They have extremely thin blades. So sometimes I will steal his knife to do some really precise cutting, but they're more delicate. So he has even a few chips in his blade because it is so thin. And they're pretty expensive. So you gotta kind of decide what fits your hand the best. What type of cooking are you doing? Are a lot of family members gonna be sharing the knife, or are you gonna get your own? Regardless, you do wanna look for a knife that has the blade as one piece through the whole handle. You don't want a blade attached to a rickety handle. Any good knife brand is going to be one piece of metal through the whole thing, and then they just attach the handle on the sides. So definitely look for that. I'm a big Wusthof fan. Every knife you've seen here, with the exception of the Shun chef's knife, has been a Wusthof. It's a workhorse brand, it's a high quality brand, and it's pretty reasonably priced for a really high quality product. So that's always a good option. Aside from the chef's knife, the other thing that I probably get the most use out of in my kitchen is scissors. I do recommend getting scissors made by a knife brand because you'll get better quality. Make sure they come apart. That'll make them easier to clean. But I actually do a lot of basic tasks with the scissors. I chop green onions, I chop up my salad to make it kind of a chopped salad once it's all done. I cut up chicken a lot of times with scissors. It's just easier. I love knives, but if the scissors can do the job better, by all means, use the scissors. The other thing I wanted to talk about is sharpening your knives. So this is a honing steel. Honing steels don't actually sharpen your knives. They are worth having though. What they do is they line up the steel back into a straight line. And so when you hone a knife, you're just going like this. It's not actually sharpening it, but it'll have the effect of sharpening it because it's realigning all of the metal. An actual knife sharpener, they do sell at-home knife sharpeners, but what you have to understand about sharpening a knife is a little bit of metal is actually being removed every time you sharpen your knife. So it is kind of a delicate process. You could start to ruin your knives if you sharpen them incorrectly. I personally feel better taking my knives to be sharpened professionally. A lot of stores like a Sur La Table, maybe a Williams-Sonoma, places like that, do have knife sharpening in-house. Our farmer's market actually has a guy who sharpens knives for like a couple bucks an inch for the length of the knife. Or if you live in a big city that has like a knife depot meant mainly for like restaurants, they'll usually have really cheap knife sharpening options there too. But yeah, I do recommend professional knife sharpening maybe once every year or two. But otherwise, you could do the honing steel yourself every couple weeks just to make sure you're getting tip-top performance from your knife. All right, hopefully that answers everybody's questions about knives and you're not gonna go wasting your money on a bunch of mystery knives that serve no actual purpose.